Most of you know that I work with my film negatives 99.9% of the time in my darkroom, and on the odd occasion when I do show scan negatives on the channel, I often get asked how I scan. I used to scan my negatives using my ENLARGER in the darkroom, but most of you know my darkroom is a shed in the garden, and it's a bit of a pain in the butt to keep running outside just to scan negatives. So I ended up buying a cheap Kenro film scanner, which is cheap and cheerful, but nowhere near as good as using my DSLR. So how do I scan using my DSLR? Well, it's quite simple. I just take one of my LED video lights and screw a couple of curtain pole brackets into the barn door holes. Job done. I then find a box that I can cut a square into. Job done. I then take a diffuser from another LED panel. Job done. I then place a cardboard razor on the curtain pole brackets that I've screwed into the barn door holes on the LED panel, and I use the Kenro 35mm negative slide thingamajig ready for my negs. Job done. I plug the LED panel into the mains so that the light stays constant, and then I use a couple of extension tubes on a 50mm lens that attaches to my DSLR via an M42 screw fit adapter. I then set my lens to f8 and position my DSLR, and using the digital zoom function, I zoom all the way into the negative to find my focus. My DSLR is set to 100 ISO, and instead of RAW I use large JPEG and set my picture style to monochrome with the contrast set to minimal and the sharpness set to medium. I don't print my scans, but if I did I'd shoot RAW, so JPEG is fine. Once my DSLR is all tickety-boo, I visually inspect for my shutter speed. Knowing what I know in the darkroom on how to make contact sheets, I set my shutter speed so that the sprocket holes are barely visible once I've taken the photograph. As you can see here, they're barely visible. I can then continue shooting the rest of my negs from that roll. Simple. Once I have finished taking the photographs of my negatives, I load them into Lightroom. As all my negatives were shot the same, I tweaked the first negative, crop, and then copy and paste those settings onto the rest of the images. If I only scan one or two negs, I'll swerve Lightroom altogether and put them straight into Photoshop and apply any tweaks necessary, such as removing an eye bogey from Pirate George the One-Eyed Shih Tzu, recrop and job done. The Kenro scanner is a lot easier at desktop level, and you can choose various levels of contrast, which do vary a great deal, as you can see here. Here is the DSLR and Kenro side by side. And if we zoom in, you can see the Kenro image is starting to break apart. You can see the artifacts where the arrows are pointing, and the DSLR is nowhere near as bad. So that's how I scan my negatives using my DSLR. Cheap and cheerful, rummaging around the garage for parts that I need. And when I want to scan my medium format negatives, I'll use the negative carrier in much the same way. Like I said at the start, I only scan for either a reference or to show you guys more images from a roll of film when I make a video. My way may be laughable, but it works for me and it is simple. And this video is in no way throwing the Kenro under the bus. It works well and is great for quick scanning on your desk, and I do use it to quick reference my 35mm negs on a hard drive. Let me know in the comments section how you scan your negatives, and in particular if it's a DSLR, how do you find the perfect exposure? Cheers guys!